Namaste. Welcome to Wise Owl Career Guide. Today we have Mr. Prakash Kunta with us, who's been in the field of telecom marketing through his career. Let's hear from him what is his journey been like. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for having me on board.
So, sir, before we get into your career, what has been your educational background?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a commerce graduate, and after my commerce, I did my MBA. I did my MBA from Symbiosis, which is
Okay.
Symbiosis Center of Management and HRD,
Mhm.
specializing in marketing, and I completed it in '96. Yeah.
Okay. So, sir, you got your first job through campus selection, or
Yes.
was there a gap? You got your
Yes.
job there?
Yeah. So I did my first job was Sterling Resorts actually, and that's the
Okay.
only company I applied for during the campus interviews because I believed in those days services as a business was just starting off, and I thought that
Hmm.
if you get a grounding in services, it's
Right.
going to be it's going to be a deep grounding of business, and it would give
Mm-hmm.
you opportunities to move into any sector, so to speak. And at that time,
Right.
timeshare was the most difficult because you had to get customers to pay close to 200, 300,000 rupees to get a
Mm-hmm.
timeshare over something which they did not even see. And that getting
Right.
that kind of money from a person would mean a lot of conviction and as well as a lot of credibility for somebody to part with that kind of money. Therefore, I thought
Right.
that that would be a good grounding for me uh,
Mm-hmm.
as I build my career from there, because being in a tangible FMCG, so traditional as everybody says,
Right.
uh, is not necessarily at that point, I believed it might be the way the world will move, because there's a huge difference between a customer buying something he can touch, see, and feel versus
Mm-hmm.
something which he just sees once in a year, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it is amazing to have that kind of clarity at the start of your career. So, from Sterling, how did telecom happen?
Yeah, so I moved into Sterling from '96. I was there till '98, and to be candid, by
Okay.
that time it was going through trouble, and
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't too much money, and there were rumors that the company will shut down and all of that. Fortunately, it has
Okay.
survived even now. It's still present. But
Right.
at that time, salaries used to come late and all of that. And I had this in my head that after an MBA, I can't ask my parents for money. And it
Mm-hmm.
had reached a point where salaries would typically get delayed by 30 to 40 days. And,
Okay.
at that point, so two things actually propelled me. One is personal and one is professional. So personal was this entire thing that I didn't want to borrow money
Right.
from my parents, and professional was at that point telecom was just starting off. Cellular was just it had just started, and
Right.
I saw this opportunity. I believed that telecom would be the next big thing, simply because at those days I remember most landlines you had to have a waiting list, and you would get a landline after a year or two, and it was very
Absolutely.
difficult to get connectivity. And I believed that time that telecom would be big because it would change the way the as in the industry moves and everything happens. And to me, frankly, I think human beings are all about connecting, right? At the end of the day,
Right.
a human being is not an island. He or she will want to interact with other human beings, and therefore telecom served that purpose, that core benefit, and which is why
Mm-hmm.
I believe that it will be big. And I got an opportunity, and in that opportunity, I actually got a frontline opportunity. But I said, at this age and at this point in my career, it's worth taking the risk, and therefore I grabbed it with open arms, even though it was a very junior position, but it was
Mm-hmm.
in sales. And uh, I looked at the journey as two parts. I needed customer service and sales exposure before I get into product or marketing, because my end goal
Right.
was to be in marketing. And I believe that if you know sales and you understand customer service, then you have a much richer uh, uh, human being as a
Right.
marketeer, right? Because
Absolutely.
Marketing is all about consumer, all about insights, and being able, and and actually between a buyer and a seller, there is always, while we say win-win, there is always a sweet spot in which a consumer will give money to you. That's when he sees value in what you're selling. And therefore,
Right.
at the end of the day, everything goes around to sales. And therefore, I said that, I've done 2 years of customer service in Sterling, and let me
Mhm.
look at a sales role as well. And that's what propelled me to join them. Uh, and that's why I started off with Hutchmax, which was a
Okay.
prepaid business, and they were the only ones in
Mhm.
the country which had over-the-air recharge, which I thought would be big
Okay.
because a country like India, uh, prepaid is definitely a big opportunity, simply because telecom was very expensive, right? We used to charge, it was 16 rupees a minute for a call. And
Yes.
I believe that if it had to grow, it had to grow on prepaid only, and which is why I grabbed it. So that's how I
Okay.
got into telecom. I have flirted getting out of telecom a couple of times, but I've always come back to telecom. I've done two stints in e-commerce kind of businesses, but
Okay.
have always somehow come back to telecom. So that's how it is.
Okay. So, sir, you've seen the, change in telecom in terms of 16 rupees a call to now the value of, a call being absolutely zero. The world is playing on data. The kind of roles outside India that are there in telecom were much different to what they were in India. So, could you help us understand what are the kind of marketing roles outside India in telecom?
So actually, if you look at it, the way things are now, there are a lot of the rules are very similar in the sense that what you do in India in marketing typically is
Hmm.
what's done abroad as well. Again,
Okay.
there are differences in the geographies that we operate in. So typically, if you look at Europe, Europe is a big postpaid business. I would say
Okay.
60 to 70% of the business there is still postpaid. And because it's
Hmm.
postpaid, a lot of it has got to do with handsets and handset bundling. So you do
Okay.
see a lot of marketing roles on postpaid. You see a lot of
Hmm.
roles in marketing having post handsets as well, and therefore that
Hmm.
makes it a slightly different. The other thing that is becoming different, actually, like I said, the marketing structures in most companies, whether in India or overseas, are more or less the same. It's just
Okay.
the gravity of or the importance of a particular role changes from
Hmm.
geography to geography depending on the construct of the business. So, for
Okay.
example, in India, prepaid would typically be bigger because 80% of the business is prepaid. But in Europe, it
Right.
would be postpaid because postpaid has higher value and therefore higher margin flow through, and also
Okay.
more longer customer base, and therefore postpaid roles are much better there. But if you look at marketing roles and what the new marketing roles which are taking over now, especially for
Hmm.
the youngsters, is more on terms of digital and partnerships. Because
Okay.
today telecom operators have realized that there are two drivers to further growth. Because most
Hmm.
today, if you look at least in the developed world, I'm not talking of sub-Saharan Africa, which is still underpenetrated, but most other
Hmm.
markets are 100% plus penetrated, which means there are the only person without a cellular connection is somebody who's just born 1 hour ago, or
Okay.
some old fuddy-duddy who's on a life support. So pretty much
Right.
everybody else has at least one connection, and therefore most operators today are under pressure to grow, and the growth is only possible in the two or three adjacent areas, which is digital as well as partnerships, talking to your next,
Okay.
whether it's entertainment, whether it's education, whether it's travel, and all these portfolios are bringing in the growth.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
so that's the way you would look at it. The other important role which is coming out is pricing, uh, because uh,
Hmm.
because as the businesses evolve,
Right.
pricing becomes much more important than it used to be. So if you look at roles which are becoming more important in marketing are pricing, digital,
Hmm.
and the partnerships part, while
Okay.
traditional postpaid, prepaid, or roaming or international are slowly, just being BAU, so to speak.
Being
Yeah.
right. So, sir, what are the kind of qualifications that telecom companies are looking at when it comes to hiring freshers
So
for marketing
typically,
roles?
yeah. So typically, a fresher, anybody with a management background, more or less will make the cut. But if the
Okay,
guy has a techno commercial background, it would be even better.
okay.
Because pure technology, pure commercial doesn't exist, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
telecom, to me, if you, my opinion, telecom is something like an airline. So it's a very capital intensive industry, but with a very,
Mm-hmm.
very strong consumer face. So
Right.
I don't think any other industries like this, Amazons and the Flipkarts and all of those are very consumer oriented. They don't have huge capex investments. Even
Hmm.
if they do, they have it only in logistics and all of that, which is,
Right.
warehouses and things like that, which are not, which don't have a shelf life, because a warehouse is a warehouse. You're not going to keep
Hmm.
changing it every. While in telecom, what is happening now is, if you look at the 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G evolution, 2G to 3G to
Hmm.
close to 15 years, 3G to
Right.
4G to 4 years, and 4G to 5G is taken between 2 to 2.5 years. So which means your,
Absolutely.
however, capital expenditure has not gone down. So the Moore's law is playing in, right? Every year,
Yeah.
it increment, what the capability doubles and the cost goes one fourth. So therefore, you need to monetize as much as you can in the short while, which is why
Absolutely.
you working in a telco today is like being on a treadmill. You got to be running
Okay.
just to stand where you are. Yeah,
Right.
so that's what it is. Yeah.
And so, what are the kind of soft skills that are being seen? Because, gone are the days when just your educational background would get you a job. The interviews have become more extensive now. So, what are the kind of soft skills that the companies are looking at in freshers?
Yeah. So I think one is definitely the ability to be a self-starter.
Okay.
Telcos today, if you look at even in India, for example, earlier telcos used to have 12 or 14 or 15 levels. It's all been
Hmm.
compressed now. They're all down to 3, 4 levels. And
Okay.
even in the world outside,
Hmm.
levels have been compressed. So there is less, what to say, there's no assistant managers or others. Let's put it the other way around. No executive, senior executive, assistant managers, senior managers, assistant managers. It's all become very, very compressed. And because it's
Okay.
compressed, what tends to happen is, you're right, the soft skills that are required are very different from what it used to be earlier. Now
Hmm.
they obviously look at influencing, ability to self-start rather than being told what to do, the
Okay.
ability to think out of the box, look at the bigger picture, be comfortable with what you are, being able to, convince people, uh, ability to negotiate, because you 8 out of 10 times a marketeer is only negotiating. Either he's negotiating with sales, he's negotiating with customer service, he's negotiating with legal, he's negotiating with the technology. Because if you've got to make a product, technology will typically come back and say that product will take 2 months to finish, because
Right.
technology guys don't want to take a chance, because today networks are under superhuman pressure. Because
Hmm.
while we say data and all of that, uh, the expectation from networks have gone up substantially, because
Right.
if you look at the earlier day, when you were making voice calls, you needed network only when you were making a call.
Yeah.
Now with the data network, the network has to be at there all times, and 24 bar
Absolutely.
7. So even if the customer is not making a call, he expects that he gets the same speed, or the same kind of service that he would get when he's using the phone, because he's
Right.
getting some WhatsApp updates, he's getting some, Facebook updates which keep coming. So the therefore, what to say, attachment times have gone up, and engagement times have also gone up. So while Facebook and social media companies say that, their attachment or their engagement time is like 4 hours or 6 hours, please note, for telecom it becomes 24 hours, because if the customer is on Facebook or Google or Instagram or Snapchat, he has to have a telecom network. And therefore,
Absolutely.
and that's why
The
the,
alerts are there.
yeah, and that's exactly what drives a marketeer in telecom, because the moments of truth, if you use that word, is
Yeah,
24 bar 7 bar 365. So just imagine the level of engagement that this category has on customers or consumers. And therefore,
absolutely.
management also expects that kind of stuff. So basically, a guy who comes to telecom will have to not be doing it for a job, but because
Hmm.
he loves what it is to connect people.
Right.
So and that's the big difference. So once that is clear, then the soft skills will come into play onto that.
Okay. Sir, way back when the telecom started booming, they used to be one of the highest paying, jobs, even for freshers. Is that still the scene, when it comes to salaries, or have they
Again,
become more par at, with your banking or your FMCG jobs?
I would say that again it depends on which part of the business you're looking at. I don't
Hmm.
think telecom is not paid well. Telecom is fairly decent, but yeah, it is reaching maturity levels. And
Okay.
when an industry starts maturing, obviously you're not going to get a 50, 60, 80% increment or a 60,
Right.
80%, first day, first job kind of salary. And also in terms of categories. So telecom used to be a sunrise sector. Now it is Amazon and the Flipkarts who give those kind of salaries. Telecom is
Right.
also now is actually stuck between being a utility and a service. Okay, and
Right.
utilities typically give you great returns,
Hmm.
but they're consistent. And because of which,
Right.
what happens is the ability to innovate and the ability to deliver further new incrementality becomes limited, and therefore salaries are therefore started becoming a little more reserved. But
Hmm.
obviously, like I said, we don't have the luxury of uh, being the e-commerce players who don't have capex, right? We still have tons
Right.
of capex, and
Capex.
the focus is therefore on capex more than people. But
Hmm.
having said that, if you have the right skills, which is what the telcos are looking for, they do pay well.
Okay.
So it's now no longer a flat salary per grade. It's become a wider
Hmm.
range
Okay.
because of the compression of the grades, the range
Hmm.
within a grade becomes much wider.
Okay. And what are the kind of opportunities available for Indian freshers in telecom companies outside India?
It To be candid, it would be very, very difficult for Indian freshers to get jobs outside unless they,
Okay.
join a multinational or something like that. It's also
Hmm.
because what comes into play is language.
Right.
One, local, right? Secondly, for
Hmm.
freshers, typically people would want them to be in sales or service or customer service, not so much in marketing, because marketing they would need people with clearly executable skills that they can see, or clearly
Right.
executable backgrounds. And therefore, at this point in time, it might be very unlikely that a fresher could actually get a job outside India unless he has some skills which are not seen anywhere else, which is
Okay.
very so which that will have to be more in the tech space and more in the
Hmm.
digital space. But
Okay.
I would not bet on freshers trying to find jobs overseas unless they have family or friends or relatives who can,
Hmm.
house them for a very long time. So if they're
Okay.
looking at migrating, so like for example,
Hmm.
Canada has a lot of migration programs. If they're looking
Right.
at migrating and then doing it, then yes, perhaps they will have chances. But it's
Okay.
advisable for them to, get if they're looking at campus placements and things like that, it's much better that they do it in India, work in India, and then move out because Indian talent, Indian experience is definitely counted on more because
Okay.
of the intensity of competition because, like I said, the world outside is not as competitive as India. So
Hmm.
what you learn in India is the ability on basically to be able to compete and as an individual and as a company. And your ability to
Okay.
learn is much more in India than anywhere else, at least in the telecom domain. Because in telecom in India, you have to think like an entrepreneur, which is not the
Okay.
case in most countries. So for an
Okay.
Indian fresher, I would strongly urge that he breaks ground in India before trying to go overseas.
Overseas. Okay.
Yeah.
So through your experience, if we were to ask you one tip to be able to make a successful career, what would that tip be?
Mm. Ability to be patient and persevere.
Okay.
I will give more than one tip because careers are
Sure.
long. Uh,
Yes.
the more I see today, more I can see that people are very today and tomorrow oriented. I think you've got to
Hmm.
stay patient, persevere, and be willing to learn at all times. A
Okay.
lot of your careers can always be up down. It's not a flat line upward or a flat line downward or a flat line. It's
Right.
it's like a heartbeat, right? So there will be ups and downs. So you need to be patient, you need to persevere, and you need to keep learning. And like I was watching one little LinkedIn post of Nitin Paranjape the other day, which made a lot of
Hmm.
sense. He said that working in an organization is working in a pyramid. So you got to be clear that as you grow, mm, the numbers are against you, right? Because there are lesser and lesser people as you grow. So one thing you
Right.
need to be able to understand is, do you fit in a place or not? If you don't fit in,
Okay.
start looking to move rather than becoming cynical, which opened my eyes
Sure.
a lot. So three things
Hmm.
that if you need to say: one, patience, persevere,
Right.
learning, and
Hmm.
ability to call out. You're not married to the company, and the company is not married to you. So
Absolutely.
keep doing these three things before. And if you think that you don't fit in, then rather than getting cynical about it, start trying to find your own way.
Find your own way. Thank you so much, sir, for
Yeah,
joining us today and sharing your experience with us. Thank you.
my pleasure. Take care. Bye bye.
So that was Mr. Prakash Kumta sharing with us his journey and how very early on, right after his MBA, he could decide and understand what is it that he wants to learn through his career and the kind of companies that he want to work with. And as he said when he was sharing his tip for success, that patience and perseverance is something that you need to have to be able to grow in your career at a steady pace. When I'm saying steady, you cannot expect, sudden ups and sudden downs. They do happen, but for a consistently long journey and to be able to, enjoy your journey, you need to be persistent. You need to understand when you've outgrown a company or outgrown a role, either you look for opportunities within your company or you search outside. But to sit and blame the company or the people around you is something which is not gonna, advance your career or you as a person, in itself. So be persistent, persevere, and learn as you go along. Understand you will be changing, the roles will be changing, the market will be changing. So be consistent and you will have a successful career, be it telecom or anywhere else. If you have any questions that you want to understand or ask about telecom and as an industry and the jobs available in it, do write to us in comments below and we'll answer them. Also, do like, share, and subscribe the channel. Thank you.